When you start, like you're setting up your own business, then you tend to forget it. And that is, to me, one of the most important mistakes you can make in the beginning. That you are so busy with, I don't know, getting finance, being good in administration of your business, or all that, yet you simply forget to talk about what you do, right? And there is a simple rule: at least, I don't know, 50% of your time you do what you do, and 50% of your time you spend on talking about, doing marketing, doing PR, talking about what you do or what you're going to achieve. And I totally understand how difficult that is, especially in the beginning. Teams, I reduce misunderstandings between bosses and team members, all these things. So my professional life is about coaching, training, and speaking about communication. So I talk about talking, I talk about voiding. This is what I do. I do that, if you would ask my mom, probably all my life. But being mom's good girl, I studied that professionally, and I spent a good deal of my professional life in the corporate world with all the ups and downs before I set up my own shop. And this is already going on since 2006. So, and I'm happy if I can work with teams or individuals who really want to speak more easily and better in public.
So what made you leave the corporate world? Because I'm guessing it was probably a good gig for you, traveling around, doing lots of cool stuff. What made you decide to jump ship and set up your own shop?
There is two reasons. There is the pain reason, and that already started 20 years back, that a lot of the corporate world is being busy with internal stuff, and not with stuff that helps you or the people you work for. In an agency, it doesn't matter, pushing things forward, but it's always kind of making sure that someone else has your back. So to me, that was already backwards oriented, which I do not like. So it was like 70% of my time I spent with that. And in terms of diplomacy, actually, I haven't done more than the beginner's course. So I'm very easy to hurt. Let me put it like that. I'm very easy to hurt because I do so many things wrong in terms of diplomacy, right? I push forward, and then people do not like that. And then nothing happens, and then you have to spend all day long with excuses, all that. That was one. And then there was the joy part, where you say, like, there are so many interesting companies out there. There are so many interesting industries out there. Historically, I come from the IT and the media world, but there is so much going on. The world is so rich in interesting industries, startups, scale up, stock exchange companies. There is so much interesting stuff, and I consider that as something very intriguing for me, to be honest.
So what are the main kind of industries that you work in? You mentioned tech. So you kind of working with tech companies mainly?
A lot. I do still work a lot with tech companies, but that does not necessarily mean that they are my main clients. Energy is kicking off tremendously, startups and scale up, and a lot in the financial world. So yeah.
So a lot of my sort of listeners and audience are small businesses, people working for themselves, self-employed. What do you think are the biggest mistakes people make when it comes to communication? Because communication is everything in a lot of respects. So what's the biggest errors, the biggest mistakes you see people making?
Let me separate that a little bit. When you start, like you're setting up your own business, then you tend to forget it. And that is, to me, one of the most important mistakes you can make in the beginning. That you are so busy with, I don't know, getting finance, being good in administration of your business, or all that, yet you simply forget to talk about what you do. right? And there is a simple rule, at least, I don't know, 50% of your time you do what you do, and 50% of your time you spend on talking about, doing marketing, doing PR, talking about what you do or what you're going to achieve. And I totally understand how difficult that is, especially in the beginning, let's say the first 6 months, because you're overwhelmed with everything, right? There's so many things to consider. And there's clients and there is invoices, if you're lucky, and all that. So you tend to forget. So this is my first tip. Do not forget it. Think of it. Make it part of your priority. And then later on, so the first 2 years probably have gone fine and brilliant. You have to take decisions. What is an important channel to feed, and what can you leave out? So then within the communication part, prioritizing. Is it, how do I approach my clients? Email, is it a newsletter? Is it a podcast? Do I talk on the phone, one-on-one? What is the best way? You have to be very conscious about that. And I think there is a part of that means saying no to a lot of things, because it's probably not necessary for your business to be on Instagram, for instance, right? Or you're not a very big Twitter company for many, many reasons. But think about it consciously. What is really important for me to reach my client base? And if once you have done that, talk, put yourself out there. There is two things that can happen. Either it's imposter syndrome. You think, oh my God, what I have to say is not important enough. That is only true for 20% of the aspects you're thinking of. 70% is interesting, because in your particular way of putting yourself out there, it's interesting. So because you have a product, a service, a paradigm you think about, and it's very easy for people to follow and I say, oh yeah, cool. Katja or Paul, they think about this or that particular aspect in this world, like this and that. Put it out there. That is one thing. And then try to initiate a dialogue. That's the second one. I think we tend to forget. Sometimes we just send, and communication is a multi-logue. The best communication happens when you talk, people talk back, and then other people talk about what you talked about. Then we really start a conversation that in the end leads to more profitable ideas. People collaborating more easily with each other. It's a very important point. But if you do not put ourselves out there, if you do not ask questions, you will not have any response, right? So, and a big point here is this can be truly disappointing. And to overcome these disappointments, people not answering your emails, your LinkedIn post does not get that much hits as you thought. And then not giving up. Blame it on the algorithm, that's what I always say, and try again. Next time, there might be an audience for it, right? So not giving up, even if the client you sent an offer to does not come back, you have no idea why, and do not take it personally. Still think that the idea you have, the way you communicated that idea is good, right? And then try again and again and again. And it's a hard life. It's not easy, because in the noise the communication world makes nowadays, it's not easy to find exactly that proper sound that is heard, understood, and is responded to. So yeah.
2 points, Katja. Imposter syndrome, that's a big thing that I help people with. How do you suggest people get over that when it comes to putting themselves out there? What do you say to your clients when they say, well, yeah, I know what you're saying, but I just don't feel it's right for me to be putting myself out there? How do you help them?
There is two things I usually do in the beginning, right? Or the things I start with. One thing is that let's say it's topic A, right? And say, okay, who could you help with? So very, very concrete, say, how could that topic be helpful for whomever? And the more specific you are, the more tailored, the more individualized you make that, the more easy it is for people to say like, it could help people like Paul in the first 6 months of their business. Okay, and then you get a yes. So then you kind of segment or separate things from each other. Then, okay, so it is interesting for a part of your audience. Oh, yes. Oh, okay. How would you talk to that audience? And all of a sudden, the people or clients who still there 2 minutes ago, they would have an imposter syndrome, all of a sudden see a mission and say like, yes, that could be helpful for that person. So that's one of the things that where I start with. There is always a target group. And the second thing, this is more from the inside out. And then there is something I do from the outside in, asking again a question like, where in the world or what moments, what are touch points where people talk about that subject? And then let the person with the imposter syndrome, let them research that. That could be that they come back with, oh, there was a conference on this. You see, who was speaking there? And how did you like the talk? And then put yourself in comparison with that person. And of course, there is always people who do what you do better. Yes. But most of the times, that's at least my personal experience, people find their spot, find their place within this ecosystem of their topic. And then all of a sudden they learn, okay, this is something I could talk about. This is something I would like to talk about. And this I rather leave out. So they find their place, right, in this whole system. And then the imposter syndrome is still there, by the way, and we will always have that. Right. Even I do still have that after 15 years. I'm like, oh my God, do really people really listen to what I say? And then sometimes they say, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you found me, you helped me finding my voice. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is why I do it. Thank you. So it is very often we expect tout le monde, everybody to react to us. And if that is not happening, we are unsatisfied. But rather focus on the 1, 2, 3 wonderful comments you got, the thank you notes you get, and try to ignore the others and work from there.
It's interesting, isn't it, that you may get 99 really, really good positive comments, but you get one negative one, and all of your focus goes on the negative one. What makes you think people do that? And how can they stop doing that?
Because we have this whole, we have this whole universe in our heads. We know everything about ourselves, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff, all the dangerous stuff. Our audience does not. Our audience only knows what we told them, what is written there. They do not know more. The moment when we read this negative comment that is exactly replying to the big and the dangerous part in our heads, where all this thing, oh yeah, you can do that part is situated. Let me put it like that. I always dedicate a certain amount of time to what we call that the critical mirror, right? There is people who give you a critical mirror, which is okay. But once this time is up, dedicate the rest of the time to the rest, to the positive, to the constructive, to the neutral. Many times in the critical feedback, there is some truth in there. They give you a good hints about what you could do better. Right? It's very often, and that may be the most important point, do not take it personal. take it content, look for a content part that's interesting in there, even in the critical one. But again, as I said, after a certain amount of time, say, okay, it is usually neuroscientifically, we say it is one part is a positive. And very often due to our setup in survival, we think, okay, we need to survive. And that's why our amygdala is 10 times bigger than the nucleus accumbens. And the nucleus accumbens is the instrument that helps us processing positive feedback. But due to the fact that the amygdala gets 10 times more, is 10 times more receptive for negative stuff, and then there is only 1 out of 10 that's positive, we need to feed this positive instrument more. And again, to me, timing is very simple to help them. Okay, it's 5 minutes. We talk about negative stuff now for 5 minutes. And after that, we close the negative box.
I love that. It's a great idea. I've suggested this a few times, that if you want to be miserable, if you want to be pissed off, if you want to get upset, then yeah, get that, do those things, but put a timer on it. And the important thing is, though, once that time is finished, you must stop.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are used to put things into a container, right? Either in a timing container or content container. And that maybe it won't work for the first 2 times, right? And sometimes people come back and say, yeah, I haven't been miserable enough. So, okay, you get 5 more minutes, but be really miserable, right? Like really. So be really bad. And then after 5 minutes, it helps to say like, okay, yeah. That was awesome. Okay, cool. So now for the positive stuff. But indeed, it helps us when we put an instrument like the clock on it. It helps us to have a handle, right? Psychologically, not really much changed, but it gives us the feeling of being in control. Mm-hmm. And that is good for us.
You mentioned earlier that about sort of people getting frustrated and giving up and not actually doing their kind of messaging because the posts on LinkedIn or wherever don't get a response. Now, I've been guilty of this as well. And you said blame the algorithm. What practical steps can people do to actually keep pushing themselves forward to post, even though they're not getting the responses they think they should be getting?
There's a psychological one and there is a technical one. Let me start with the technical one. What I found very helpful and what I recommend is that you read a lot. Like read things on LinkedIn that companies post that have to do with your topic. Same for Twitter. Same on let's say in the news. Have a news feed for yourself that has to do with the topics you are dealing with, whatever these topics may be. And the moment you do that, the next thing is start commenting on these things that are posted on LinkedIn by companies or by other people. Start commenting on those and build your reputation. Over time, your opinion will be valued, even if your own post does not get that much response, right? So that's a technical one. To me, that was always helpful. That people think, oh yeah, you made a comment, I don't know, last week about this or that, and that. And besides that, good side effect, you learn a lot. You learn a lot if you just read a lot and you learn to compartmentalize, to say, okay, this is a very important one, this is less important. So put yourself out as a commentator, and then your own posts will be probably read more.
That's a really good point, Katja. So, because what basically most people do, and again, myself included up until a certain point, is we post and we post and we post, expecting people to come and do stuff on our posts, but we don't go to other posts and engage on the other posts. Exactly. And it's a two-way story. You can't get noticed if you don't go to other people's posts, because you expect people to see your stuff, but they won't see it unless they know you exist. Because
Exactly.
like, take LinkedIn. I've got, I don't know, not that many, maybe 2,500 contacts and followers. Now I can post, but they're not looking at my stuff because they don't know I'm there. Whereas if I'm commenting on their stuff, oh, who's this Paul Wilson guy? What's he talking about? And that's a good point, by the way. Let me go and find his profile.
Exactly.
And then you start to build this relationship that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah. So that's a technical part. Indeed, what you say, right? We expect so many things from others, and we are not willing to move our asses basically into the direction of our audience. That is one. And the second one, and this is something that applies to everything online, but applies to everything offline as well. It's the same when you go into a discussion with people. I always recommend to have 2 or 3, let's call them Socratic questions ready, that look at your topic from a very edgy perspective. So put a thesis, put a statement out there where people can attach themselves to, either in a very critical way, that's okay, or in a positive way, but make it interesting. There is 2 reasons for that. First of all, people start thinking about what you do, which is always a good thing. And second, they will form an opinion on this, which is a good thing as well. And all of a sudden, there is an opportunity for discussion, which is a good thing, right? But and a question is always one of the best ways to communicate something, not in terms of, okay, I give out a statement, but I bring it as a question. So, and if you learn to think about your own topics or the things you care about in that particular way, phrase it as a question and do it in a way that others can connect to it, make it bigger, then you might have a chance that your next LinkedIn post is about that. And that's a good thing as well, right? And so you build on your customer base.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Katja, and I totally agree with this, is that you said this word, you become a commentator. So instead of just saying, oh, great post, Paul, love the photograph, you actually start posting questions, or I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, somebody on LinkedIn posted about drinking 2 liters of water a day. And I responded in a very positive way saying, that's an urban myth. There is no evidence that we need to drink 2 liters of water a day. And I cited where this originated from and some studies that have been done recently. And that generated some conversation because basically the guy that had posted didn't want to accept. Yeah. And I did it in a very polite, very respectful way. I kind of made my point and backed it up. And that's what you're talking about, isn't it? It's about getting out. Now, water and fitness is not my thing, but it was an interesting viewpoint to put on this guy's post. And it generated other comments. So it was good for him because it kept his post alive. But also, that's just one example of how you can become a commentator.
And adding on that, if you not just make a comment, but indeed either start or end with, we call that a Socratic question. And the Socratic question is a question that is like in a throwing a stone into water, it makes circles. So, and the question is phrased in a way that others can join the discussion. And
Can you give an example, Katja?
Yeah, let's stick to that water. Let's stick to that water example you just made, right? 2 liters of water. You made a comment on, okay, that's an urban myth. You proved that point. And to add on this, a Socratic question would be something like, what if the whole world would drink 2 liters of water, right? So, and not in a judgmental way, but in a way that people could easily start thinking about that, and that would open up a room for even a further discussion, that you might get people who, I don't know, who live in sub-Saharan areas and say like, yeah, you know, in the area here, we do it like this and that. And all of a sudden you create richness towards one or the other topic, and not just, you don't just want to be right in what you say with your comment. It is opening up for something bigger where we all as society, as human beings, can learn. And that is one of the things communication should enable.
Yeah, because communication isn't just about getting your point across, it's about opening the discussion.
Exactly. Yes. So it's such an important point, especially when you're in a conversation with someone about something. It doesn't matter. Very often we only listen because we want to know when the other person stops talking to make our point. But the fabulous part about communication is when someone else talks about whatever, you get presence. I always call it like that, because there is something in that particular things that person says you could proactively use either in your response or in your next question, whatever that is going to be. So in my world, listening is so important, because all the golden nuggets, the presents, are coming from the other person. You just need to listen. And then you could use whatever has been said about drinking water, about, I don't know, starting a new project, an opinion. You could use that in your response. And that, again, all of a sudden that person feels and is seen and heard, because, oh, okay, this person actually listened to what I said, and not just listened, but took what I said and did something with it in their response. And that makes it beautiful.
So you're talking about what sort of active listening, because like you said, a lot of people will listen just to hear the person stop talking, so they can then go, bleh. But what you're saying is, no, listen and almost kind of like take mental notes, so that you can respond in a way that demonstrates that you have paid attention and that you are, what's the word I'm looking for? You've been respectful of that person's time, because so many people will have a conversation just to talk with no intention of actually listening to what you're saying. So by you paying attention, you're actually being very, very respectful.
Absolutely. And you show, in paraphrasing what the other person has been said, you show that you're not just heard what has been said, but that it has been going one time through your system, and you turn it into something that has something to do with yourself, right? And that makes it fascinating. And then people, like to talk to you. You're become a more likable conversation partner, and that's what we all want.
And we're not just talking about vocal conversations here, going back to what we're talking about, commenting on posts, to demonstrate that you actually read the whole post. Because I get a lot of people that will argue something because they haven't read the whole post. So what I do is, if somebody's written a long post, I will take a quote from that post and put it in my response, and then kind of talk around that, which then demonstrates that I've actually paid attention and read the whole thing. So it's not just about listening effectively, it's kind of listening by reading properly as well, and paying attention to what the person's written, because they've taken the time to write this post. Yeah, and most people just skim and then they miss it. And that's happened to me so many times.
So many times, yeah. If you add to what you said, right, you take out a quote and you comment on that quote, maybe there is even in that particular thread of comments, maybe there is one or two that kind of strengthen your position, and you could quote them. Okay, and Paul and Greg were mentioning this or that particular aspect, and then maybe you could show like, and Christina on the other side made a point of this or that. So then you not just show that you have read the comments, but even more that you were processing them and put them into a particular place that kind of supports your opinion. And all of a sudden the communication has, or the discussion you have there has become richer.
Absolutely. I completely agree, Katja. I'm going to put you on the spot now. What are your top 3 tips for helping someone become a better communicator, both vocally, as we've been talking about, but also when you're writing and responding to comments and writing your own stuff online, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, wherever?
The first thing is start with building a narrative about yourself, but not in the sense of privately, but more in a personal way, in a sense of, okay, this is what I can contribute to the world and the business I'm in. So start about putting that in a story, which is one of the best things to get connected to other people is through story, and that is helpful for yourself, but for the rest to understand more easily what you're doing, what your business is about, what your business proposal is all about. So that is a lot of work for yourself, but it's a lot of fun to do, because you can do that with wine and colleagues and friends. So I highly recommend that. And then once this narrative is shaped, which you can let professionals help you with, I'm one of them. There's a lot of many storytelling professionals out there. So that is one. A second one, in terms of put yourself out there, look for stages. And when I'm saying stages, there could be something very small. There could be a meeting with 5 people. But if you do not put yourself out there, people, you either don't get a chance to practice, which is a shame. And the second one, people won't know what you're doing. So look for stages, and do not aim for 2,000 people, and do not aim for a TEDx talk. That's not necessary. There is, if you're smart, people in your business world talk about somewhere what you do. Find these stages, and then put yourself out there and build on that. And the third one is probably the easiest one. Talk and write to yourself. In coaching, we very often say journal, right? Write down the things. Make a journal about your business success every week. And you could do the same if you're rather a talker than a writer. You could do that. Talk to yourself. Do your own podcast, only for yourself, 5 minutes a day. That's why we have all this technical stuff, right? Your telephone, right? Just can, mom. This is how this day went. Talking to yourself is so helpful, because we, as human beings, we are the only persons who, then we are honest to ourselves. And when you're used to being in a conversation with yourself, you learn what is really critical and what is good. And then it is easier to put yourself out there, because we are our own worst critics. We ourselves, right? We are really, really critical. So why not start there? After that, it's getting easier, to be honest.
I'm going to come back to your points in a second, but the thing about talking to yourself, if you're worried that you might think you are insane or going crazy, on your phone, there is a voice recorder app, yeah? Use that, talking to your phone, because what you can do is you can then get those transcribed, and maybe they can become future posts. But I do love what you said there, Katja, about becoming a storyteller.
Yeah.
People, in my view, people don't want to be informed. There's this horrible word called infotained. But if we get rid of that, people want stories. From the days when we lived around fires in caves, people have been sharing stories. That's how knowledge and information and expertise has been passed down the line. So if you're able to create stories, that's brilliant. And a lot of people go, well, I'm in the cement making industry. I've got no stories about that. Well, I would disagree. There are lots of stories you could tell. How did you get into that? What is cement made of? I hear that there could be sand is the big continent. What's the word I'm looking for? A large ingredient. That's the word. A large ingredient in making cement. I hear there's a shortage. Somebody said to me, there's a shortage, but you've got the Sahara Desert. So why is there a shortage?
Yeah.
And so you've everything that we all do has stories. We've got stories from our past, stories from our business, stories about how we found our clients, now client stories. So there are stories everywhere. You just got to, like you said, sit down and start making notes so you can remind yourself about them.
The good point about these, the narrative is that once you have a narrative, for instance, it is a very structured process. If you go through that, indeed, what you said, there are stories about your past. How did you get into the cement business? What are the values? Values is another story we use. Then there is this future thing, right? What are you going to be when you're grown up? All that. Once, when are you going? When are you considering yourself successful? Or all these future stories. Who am I? Identity stories that are going very close together with values, and all these stories, all these narratives. And that's the reason why we need to look for them. Make it more easy for other people who are not in the cement business to connect to you. Because indeed, what you say, it is not about the cement business itself, but it's about, okay, what makes people tick who are in that business? Is there a specialty, right? Is there a special breed of people in that business? And all of these stories, they have a certain emotion behind them. There could be joy or frustration or anger. Behind every story, there is an emotion. And this particular emotion or these particular emotions are the connecting glue. That is why people can connect to it, even if they are not in the cement business. All of a sudden, they have a connection to it through that emotion that is open up when you tell the story. That's the reason why stories are so helpful. It's the emotion that is behind that.
Yeah, so stories are connection. Stories are conversation makers.
Conversation makers is it's a good point. They're not a conversation themselves, but they are let me call it a door opener.
Yeah,
right. And they are only, but that's a huge part of the deal. They are opening a door for a conversation. You have to go through that door. You have to indeed take the effort and put yourself out there and indeed lead the conversation or be part of it. But a good narrative is a good start. Very often what we do is that we prepare 24 slides with 25 bullet points that no one reads, and we put it out there and we send out that slide deck, and it is like we bump on people's doors. Hey, let us in, and nobody is interested in that because there is nothing emotional in them. If you start with a story and later on bring your slide deck that you send later, there might be a chance that people will open it up or refer to it. But without the story, usually that does not happen anymore because there is much more interesting stuff ongoing somewhere else. And as human beings, we are dedicated to what is interesting and thrilling, and not to what is complicated and time consuming and most of the times boring. Right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Listen, Katja, do you have a book coming out? Are you launching something at the moment, or what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
It's very simple. Have a conversation with me on LinkedIn or on Twitter, Twitter and Media Coaching, or contact me via my website. That's easy as well. It's katjaschleicher.com or interview-training.eu. Both of them work. LinkedIn is easy. Yes, we are working on a book, but that is at the moment not the most important part. At the moment, the most important part is still to support people in putting themselves out, make their lives easier in terms of their conversations. This is basically my mission. I'm happy when my clients are happy on their stages. That is my, when they come back from, I don't know, whatever presentation or pitch or interview and tell me afterwards, I could get across my idea so easily, then I'm the most happy person in the entire world.
Listen, Katja, I really want to thank you for your time today. Before we finish, do you have any final thoughts, any final words you'd like to share before we go?
Talk, people, talk. And if you stop talk, then start writing. But not doing it is just making the world a more empty place. So no, start talking.
And on that note, listen, thank you for watching, folks, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.